We're out traveling, we see something and we think, I'd love to draw that, but we literally only have 10 minutes. Either the bus will leave or the people we're traveling with will leave. How do we capture something in such a short period of time in a quick freehand pen drawing? These 6 tips are the way I do it. The first is spend a minute just observing what we want to draw. Because once we start, the fact that we know we don't have much time is going to stop us from doing the observation that we really need. So I need to resist that urge to jump in too quickly. Work out at the very least the best place to start and what there is to draw in that starting point. My second tip is to start with the main event, because in 10 minutes we don't have time to draw much else. What is it about the scene that I want to capture? And if it's a building, what is it about the building particularly that I want to capture? I need to avoid peripheral details such as to the sides or in the foreground that don't directly relate to what I'm trying to capture. In this scene, for instance, I could want to capture the bustle of all these people in the front, which would make the building a much more peripheral background. Or I may want to capture the building, which would make the people a far more peripheral part of the scene. And the degree of simplification I would do of foreground or background would depend on that decision. My third tip is, again, particularly with the thing I'm going to start with drawing, is to get a sense of proportion and of symmetry. And this is particularly in the case of architecture. So I want to notice, for instance, that this distance here is not the same as this distance here, which it would be easy to assume it was going to be, noticing that these are double columns under the single columns above, looking to see where things align. My fourth tip is the obvious. It's to accept that a lot of detail is going to be sacrificed, particularly in an architectural scene. But it's still important to try and get some sense of the detail, which is probably part of the appeal. We're really going to be aiming to capture the effect of the detail, at least part of the detail, even though we have no chance of capturing the exactness of it. My fifth tip is work out beforehand what I'm going to do with values, with light and dark. Am I going to make any effort to represent that? And if I do, is it going to be through hatching or is it going to be by marker? And for a very quick drawing, I would always recommend marker, because it is so quick to cover a reasonable amount and create quite a lot of effect. Hatching is hard to do well if we're on the clock. And if we're traveling, having just 3 values, a lighter, a mid, and a darker value, can give us a lot of variation in terms of the effects that we draw. And my 6th tip is simply to hold our pen loosely and most of the time do nice, brisk, straight lines that are often more a flick of the wrist than anything else. This will help us get nice straight lines fairly easily and fairly quickly. Holding the pen halfway down is an excellent way to make this very loose gestural style of drawing flow quite easily. We want to avoid any intense holding of the pen and labouring over detail. This also helps us avoid even trying to draw too much detail, because it just doesn't work very well with this style of holding the pen. It's a fast sketch. It's allowed to have a fast look to it. Well, let's put these into practice drawing this fine neoclassical building in Zurich. Let's go. This took me just over 10 minutes to draw in real time. You're seeing it in double time. So if you'd like to watch it in real time, use that round cog symbol that you'll see on the screen and reduce the speed to half speed, and you'll be able to watch this at the speed I actually drew it. But notwithstanding that, this is still the slowest, I think, that I draw, because I don't have anything to reference off. So I'm having to pay a little more attention to my proportions. And once I've got this section correct, or as correct as I'm going to get it, then I can reference other parts of the building off that. So I'm aware that this is a little bit slower and that I'm going a little bit more slowly than I will need to go for the rest of the building. But I very much am feeling the time zipping past at this point, keeping these details fairly loose, fairly gestural. I'm not going to be using hatching for the shadow. I will be using marker, but I just do a few little suggestions of value in those windows. And you'll notice that with all these windows and other architectural details that are repeated across a facade, I always do that detail right the way across in the one go. It helps me get all the sizes the same so the windows don't get larger or smaller as they move along. It also means I tend to draw them in the same order, and the order in which we draw the lines of an object does affect the way the lines look. So by drawing them one after the other, I find I do the line order the same way, and it just lets them all look more the same than they would look if I did it any other way. And so now I'm just trying to suggest that the balusters for this balustrade on top of the building, and then there's this covered room at the top, probably some sort of reception room with a lantern, architectural lantern on the top. I had a bit of trouble aligning that. We're not looking straight onto this building. We are very slightly to one side, which does affect how this dome sits. It doesn't quite sit completely square to these sculptures. And you'll notice with those sculptures, I drew the effect of the sculptures, not the sculptures. This is another example where we don't want to get bogged down thinking of what the object actually is, but we just want to see what the key visual elements are in terms of points and movement and shape without worrying about what it is, and to try and capture those. And then we'll find that the object just appears. So now I'm moving out on each side with the two wings, and it's getting a bit quicker now. The timer's going, but it is quicker because I have lots of things I can align off. And again, I'm doing the symmetry from one side to the other, one side to the other. It helps keep it looking symmetrical, keep this symmetry nice and tight, because that is important for an architectural structure such as this. Just trying to sort out exactly how the pilasters worked in this section, I can remember. And I didn't quite finish that detail on the other side. I got distracted before I got all of that into place. And now there's a few more sculptural groups. I almost forgot these little balustrades on the wings and the little sculptures in the corners, so I was quite pleased when I realised I'd spotted those before I moved on. Now, a few suggestions of people, and I realise now that with the time I'm not going to do much more than this in terms of the throng of people in this plaza. I'm just going to add a few people so it's clear this is a large space of people walking around. I do one quite close because that gives the sense of this is a very large open area. A very quick suggestion for some architectural context that this building is in a town. There are things around it. That's incredibly gestural for me, as you probably know. And now I want to add some tone to get some value happening, to get some shadows to suggest the colonnade, to get some more value to represent the colour of the roof, the darker colour up there. And just generally to highlight some of the details. And marker is an incredibly quick way to create quite some difference, really make our lines pop. There's one last thing I want to do, which I really did want to do when I drew this, and that was to add this tone here, just to represent the colour, the darker colour of the lower part of the building. I feel like it's an important part to establish the sense of proportions. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting. It's a great skill to develop, really fast drawing. And in a sense, we all develop our own way of making that work. But I hope these 6 tips are helpful in giving a sense of some of the options, some of the ways we can approach this particular, very satisfying way to draw. And of course, this photo reference is on my channel community page. So I hope you have a go drawing this. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, and in however much time you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.